The glass door swung open with a gentle chime, and the cool air of the boutique spilled out into the busy downtown street. Inside, the faint scent of polished wood and designer fabric lingered. The boutique was one of those sleek, minimalistic shops. Soft lighting, carefully curated displays, and shelves that whispered luxury with every folded garment. A tall black woman stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She wore a fitted blazer the color of midnight, her hair neatly pulled back, and a simple pearl necklace that gleamed faintly in the light. She moved with an elegance that drew eyes without her ever demanding attention. For her, this was an ordinary errand. She browsed the racks with calm efficiency, selecting a few items, a silk blouse, a leather clutch, and a pair of shoes. Each piece she handled with care, tucking it neatly over her arm. To the staff at the counter, she looked like any other customer finishing a late afternoon purchase. She reached the register, placing her items carefully on the counter. The young clerk behind the register glanced up at her, his smile polite but perfunctory. He scanned each item, the total ringing up on the screen with a soft beep. "That'll be $428.76, he said casually. The woman nodded, slipping a sleek black card from her wallet. It wasn't just any card. It was heavy, metallic, the kind that made a faint clink when placed on the counter. She set it down with quiet confidence. The clerk's eyes flicked to the card, then back up at her. Something in his expression shifted, the easy indifference hardening into suspicion. He picked up the card slowly, turning it between his fingers as if it didn't quite belong. The woman said nothing at first. She simply folded her hands on the counter, her posture straight, her gaze calm. She had done this countless times before. Shopped, paid, moved on with her day. There was nothing unusual here. Yet the silence stretched. The clerk still hadn't swiped the card. Instead, he glanced around the store, then back at her, his brow furrowed as though some quiet doubt had lodged in his mind. She could feel the weight of his hesitation, though she kept her composure. "You may run the card," she said evenly, her voice smooth but firm. The clerk blinked as if snapped out of a thought and gave a thin smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Right," he muttered, but his fingers lingered on the card a moment longer. Around them, other customers moved through the aisles, some catching the exchange out of the corners of their eyes. The boutique's quiet hum seemed to grow sharper, as though the air itself sensed the tension building at the register. The woman clasped her purse, still calm, still waiting. For now, this was just a purchase, just another transaction. But she had been here before, in places where suspicion followed her shadow, where silence lingered a beat too long before acceptance came, and she knew, deep in her chest, that this purchase was about to become something more. The clerk turned the card over in his hand again, his thumb brushing against the embossed numbers as though they were somehow out of place. His polite mask began to slip, replaced with a furrowed brow and a squint that carried more judgment than curiosity. "You said this is your card?" he asked slowly, his voice laced with doubt. The woman raised her eyes to meet his, calm and steady. "Yes, that is my card," she said, her tone neither defensive nor apologetic. The clerk gave a short, nervous laugh, but there was no warmth in it. He set the card flat on the counter, sliding it an inch away from her. "Funny," he said. "We don't usually see cards like this around here. They're a kind of exclusive. Not exactly what I'd expect." A hush seemed to ripple through the boutique. Customers browsing nearby pretended to be engrossed in the racks of clothes, but their ears tilted toward the register. A young couple in the shoe section exchanged quick glances, while a middle-aged woman fiddling with scarves peeked over the display. The black woman folded her hands neatly atop her purse. "And what exactly do you mean by that?" The clerk shifted uncomfortably, but instead of backing down, he leaned in, lowering his voice just enough to feign discretion, though it was loud enough that half the store could still hear. "I just mean, people sometimes find cards like these or borrow them. And when they try to use them," he shrugged, "it doesn't usually end well." The words landed heavy, sharper than he seemed to realize. He hadn't asked for ID. He hadn't even tried to process the payment. Instead, he had leapt to suspicion, to the assumption that the card couldn't possibly belong to the woman standing before him. She let the silence stretch, her eyes fixed on his. The weight of her gaze made him shift from one foot to the other, but he clung to his suspicion like armor. "I can assure you," she said at last, her voice calm but edged with steel, "that card belongs to me. If you'd like to run it, you'll see it works." The clerk chuckled again, but it was brittle, defensive. "Look, I'm just trying to protect the store. I mean, it would be really awkward if I swiped this and the bank flagged it. Imagine the scene." He gestured vaguely at the people watching. "Wouldn't want that, right?" From the corner of the store, a woman whispered to her husband, "Why doesn't he just check? He hasn't even tried it." The husband frowned, shaking his head. "Because he thinks she doesn't belong." The black woman heard the whispers but didn't react. She simply rested her fingers on the edge of the counter, her expression still composed, though her patience was wearing thin. "I came here to make a purchase," she said evenly. "You are the one making this into a spectacle." Her words struck like a quiet bell, clear and undeniable. For a flicker of a moment, the clerk faltered, but then his chin lifted, his smirk returning. "If it's really yours, then you won't mind proving it, will you?" The murmur of the crowd grew thicker, the entire store now caught in the web of his accusation. What should have been the simplest of transactions had turned into a public interrogation, and the humiliation, though unjust, was only just beginning. The clerk let the card sit untouched on the counter, his fingers drumming beside it. His smirk grew sharper, fed by the uneasy silence that had spread across the store. "You know what?" he said at last, his voice pitched loud enough for the nearest customers to hear. "I'm not going to run this card. Something doesn't feel right." The woman's eyes narrowed, though her posture remained composed. "Excuse me?" The clerk shrugged, feigning a casualness that didn't match the gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. "I said I'm not going to run it. I've seen this before. Someone comes in, tries to use a card that clearly isn't theirs, and then gets all upset when they're called out. I don't have time for games." A few customers shifted uncomfortably. One young man in line whispered to the woman beside him, "Why doesn't he just swipe it?" She shook her head, her lips pressed tight. The black woman leaned slightly closer, her voice low but firm, cutting through the tension like a blade. "You are refusing to process a legitimate payment method. That is not your call to make." The clerk leaned back, folding his arms smugly. "It is my call when I know something's off. You don't walk in here with a card like that unless you're trying to impress people or get away with something. So, no, I'm not going to embarrass myself or this store by running a stolen card." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads, others exchanged glances of disbelief. The accusations hung heavy in the air, unproven, yet delivered with a confidence meant to humiliate. The woman's jaw tightened. Still, she didn't raise her voice. She kept her tone even, though the steel in it was unmistakable. "You are accusing me of theft without a single shred of evidence. You haven't checked my ID. You haven't run the card. You are making this decision because of your assumptions about me." The clerk rolled his eyes dramatically, as if her calm reason was the most ridiculous thing he'd heard. "Oh, please, don't make this about you. I know what I'm doing." He crossed his arms, standing taller now, convinced the audience of customers would side with him. "So, unless you've got another way to pay, you might as well put these items back." He gestured at the silk blouse, the clutch, and the shoes, her carefully chosen purchases, as if they were contraband. The moment stretched, thick with humiliation. The other customers stayed frozen, caught between outrage and discomfort. And yet, the woman did not retreat. She straightened, reclaiming the space around her with quiet authority. Her voice was calm, steady, unyielding. "You've made a mistake," she said, "and very soon you'll regret it." The clerk gave a short, mocking laugh, his arms still folded tight across his chest. "We'll see about that." The battle lines were drawn, and the store itself had become the stage. The clerk, flushed with the self-satisfaction of his own authority, glanced around the store and raised his hand. "Hey, Mark," he called toward the back. "Can you come up here a second?" From the stockroom, a man in a button-down shirt, the floor manager, appeared, wiping his hands on a rag. He walked briskly to the counter, eyeing the growing cluster of onlookers. "What's going on?" The young clerk jabbed a finger toward the black woman's card, which still lay untouched on the counter. "We've got a situation. She's trying to use a card that obviously isn't hers. The manager frowned, looking from the clerk to the woman. Obviously. Yeah, the clerk said quickly, his voice dripping with certainty. Look at it. No way this belongs to her. I don't want to run it and get us in trouble when the bank rejects it. Probably stolen gasps rippled through the nearby customers. One woman covered her mouth, whispering, "Did he really just say that?" A man further back muttered, "This is going too far." The black woman stood perfectly still, her posture regal even in the face of insult. Her eyes sharp and steady, locked on the manager. Your employee is publicly accusing me of theft without evidence. I handed him a valid card. Instead of processing it, he has turned this into a spectacle. The clerk let out a derisive laugh. Oh, come on. If it were valid, you'd have nothing to worry about. Why are you so defensive? But it wasn't defensiveness. It was dignity. And the calm in her voice made the crowd lean in closer. Defensive? She said softly, her voice edged with steel. I am holding my composure while being humiliated in front of strangers for daring to make a purchase. That is not defensiveness. That is restraint. The manager shifted uncomfortably, caught between the smug certainty of his clerk and the unwavering poise of the woman before him. He glanced at the card but didn't pick it up. The weight of the moment hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Around them, customers pulled out their phones, pretending to check messages but angling their cameras discreetly. Whispers thickened. Some shook their heads, their eyes sharp with disapproval, while others avoided looking at her at all, unwilling to confront the discomfort of what they were witnessing. The clerk, mistaking the silence for support, doubled down. Look, if you really want us to believe it's yours, you're going to have to prove it. Otherwise, I'm not running this card. Ha, period. He stood taller, arms crossed, his smirk widening as if victory was already his. The woman's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, not of amusement, but of certainty. She reached out, gently pulled the card back toward her, and set it neatly on the counter once more. Then call the number on the back, she said, and let's put this matter to rest. The murmurs turned to sharp intakes of breath. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. The clerk hesitated, blinking, his smirk faltering just slightly, but pride wouldn't let him back down. He snatched up the card again with a scoff. Fine. Let's see what story you've cooked up. He reached for the store phone, smirking as though he were about to deliver the final blow. What he didn't realize was that the story wasn't hers to invent. It was the truth, and it was about to crush him. The clerk clutched the sleek black card between his fingers, as though it were evidence in a trial. His smirk returned sharp and triumphant as he reached for the store's landline. The crowd pressing around the counter fell into a hushed silence, waiting for the drama to unfold. All right then, he said, his tone mocking. Let's just see how this little story of yours holds up. He dialed the customer service number on the back of the card. Each beep echoed in the tense quiet, like the ticking of a clock before judgment. He leaned against the counter, shooting sidelong glances at the watching customers, as if inviting them to share in his inevitable victory. The black woman stood calmly, her purse clasped at her side, her expression serene. She didn't flinch, didn't frown, didn't waver. If anything, her quiet composure only unsettled him more. A click on the line followed by a crisp voice. Thank you for calling. Please state your inquiry. Yes, hello, the clerk said, pitching his voice louder than necessary so the audience could hear. I'm calling from Ridgemont Boutique. I've got someone here trying to use one of your premium cards. Problem is, I don't think it belongs to her. Can you verify the name on the account? Gasps rippled through the onlookers at his brazen words. A woman near the perfume display muttered, He actually said that. The bank representative's voice remained professional. Sir, I'll need you to read me the card number. The clerk rattled off the digits, his eyes flicking toward the woman like daggers. He could almost taste the humiliation he was about to serve her. Yes, the rep said after a pause, this card is valid. It belongs to. The clerk cut in, eager to press his case. Right, but is the person standing here really the owner? Because she sure doesn't look like. The woman lifted her chin slightly, her eyes locking onto him with calm authority. Her silence dared him to finish the sentence. The clerk faltered, stammering over the words. On the phone, the representative's voice sharpened. Sir, I can confirm without hesitation that the cardholder is indeed present. In fact, the clerk grinned smugly, waving at the crowd as though the call was already leaning in his favor. See, she had this whole thing rehearsed. But then the representative continued, their voice ringing clearly through the speaker. You should be aware that the cardholder is not only our client. She is the owner of the branch you're calling. The room fell silent. The words landed like thunder. Customers' jaws dropped. A few gasped audibly. Someone let out a low whistle. The clerk froze, his smirk collapsing into disbelief. He blinked rapidly as if hoping he had misheard. Wait, what? The woman didn't move. She simply folded her hands atop the counter, her expression poised and dignified, her silence louder than any rebuttal. The truth had been spoken, and the balance of the room shifted in an instant. The stunned silence in the boutique was almost physical, heavy, suffocating, stretching from one end of the store to the other. Every customer froze, their eyes darting between the poised black woman at the counter and the pale clerk, still clutching the phone. The bank representative's voice rang clearly through the receiver. Yes, you heard correctly. The account belongs to Dr. Alexandra Reed. She is not only a verified cardholder, but also the registered owner of the branch associated with this account. Her credentials are beyond question. Gasps erupted from the bystanders. A young woman in the corner whispered, She owns the branch? While another customer shook his head in disbelief. This is unbelievable. The clerk's mouth opened and closed, like a fish, gasping for air. His earlier bravado crumbled in an instant. He gripped the phone tighter, his knuckles white, as if holding it would stop the words from echoing any louder. She owns the branch? He stammered. Yes, the rep confirmed firmly, their voice tinged with impatience. And I strongly suggest you show her the respect she deserves. Is there anything else I can help you with? The clerk swallowed hard, his smirk long gone, replaced by a mask of shock and shame. No, that will be all. Thank you. He hung up the phone with trembling fingers, the clatter of the receiver echoing louder than he intended. For a long beat, no one moved. Then, slowly, all eyes turned to the woman, to Dr. Reed. She hadn't flinched during the entire exchange. She hadn't raised her voice. Now she simply reached forward, retrieving her card with calm grace. I believe, she said softly, her voice carrying through the silence, that you can ring up my purchase now. Her words, measured and elegant, cut deeper than any reprimand. The customers around her broke into whispers, some shaking their heads in disgust at the clerk's behavior, others murmuring admiration for her composure. The clerk's hands fumbled as he scrambled to scan her items, his face burning crimson. His earlier arrogance had evaporated, leaving only the sting of humiliation. And yet, Dr. Reed's composure didn't waver. She stood tall, dignified, as though this had never been a contest of wills, but simply the inevitable triumph of truth. The boutique was silent, but for the hurried beeps of the register, as the clerk scanned each item with shaking hands. The silk blouse, the leather clutch, the shoes, every swipe of the barcode seemed to echo with his humiliation. His earlier smugness had drained completely, leaving behind only the nervous tremor of someone who knew he had gone too far. Dr. Alexandra Reed stood calmly, her shoulders straight, her presence commanding without a word. She did not look at him with anger, nor did she gloat. Her silence was heavier than any lecture, a quiet reminder that dignity needed no raised voice. Finally, the transaction was complete. The clerk slid the bag across the counter without meeting her gaze. Your receipt, ma'am? He mumbled, his voice small, stripped of arrogance. Before Dr. Reed could respond, a ripple of sound moved through the store. It began as a few scattered claps from the back, hesitant, almost unsure, then grew louder, spreading like a wave. Within seconds, the boutique was filled with applause. Customers clapped, not just for the purchase, but for the composure, the restraint, The quiet power of a woman who had endured humiliation and emerged untouchable. Some nodded at her with respect. Others whispered her name, Doctor Reed, as though etching it into memory. The clerk shrank behind the counter, his face red, his posture slumped. He tried to busy himself with the register, but it was no use. Every clap felt like a spotlight exposing his arrogance. Doctor. Reed took the bag gracefully, resting the strap over her arm. She turned to leave, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. As she passed through the automatic doors, the applause still echoing behind her, she lifted her chin slightly, the faintest trace of a smile crossing her lips. Outside, the late afternoon sun greeted her warmly. She stepped onto the busy sidewalk, her purchases in hand, her dignity intact, her presence unshaken. Back inside, the applause faded into an awkward hush, leaving the clerk to stand alone in the silence he had created. The truth had spoken. The respect was hers, the shame was his.